Alright, welcome to another live problem solving exercise. This one's prompt is very simple. In this position we're asked what's white's best move. So we don't need to evaluate the position, but we just need to determine the best move here. In this position, some things that I'm noting first off is that white has advanced his g-pawn, which is obviously a really critical distinction in this position, and the evaluation of whether that is or is not a good move seems to me pretty important to getting a handle in this position. On the one hand, it's certainly loosened the white king's position up here on g1. On the other hand, black seems particularly ill-placed to take advantage of that. So at the moment, g5 seems very, very secure, and it provides white space. Black's pieces are really cramped. It's hard to find good places to move the knight on g6. The knight on c6 can go to b4, but what does it do from there? The bishop on h7 just has nowhere to go. The bishop on e7 too is really cramped by the pawn on g5. I'm inclined to think a little bit prophylactically here at the moment. In this position, I don't see a breakthrough idea for white. I don't see any way for white to tactically take advantage of his extra space and mobility here. It just doesn't, there's no candidate move that I see that suggests itself. I may be missing something, but I'm not tuned into the position in that way. Instead, I'm thinking positionally here, and I'm thinking that since I have such a bind on this position, that I want to make sure that black doesn't break that bind. Because if black breaks that bind, most likely with this move f6, then it's possible that my king's looseness on g1 could be a real issue. So that's my framing for the position at the moment. To me, it does seem like if it were black to move, f6 would be the move to play. I don't see what else black would really legitimately consider in this position. And after f6, I'm inclined to start liking a lot of aspects of black's position. For instance, after f6, maybe white has better, but if, for instance, you just capture on f6 and the bishop on e7 captures back, that bishop is now lined up on d4. The rook getting the half-open f-file is a huge boon for black, and in general, I feel like black has made great strides. So I really want to stop f6, and I'm not sure how to do it at the moment. Well, as soon as I said that, I see one idea here. It doesn't look to me like black is going to be able to play f6 in this position, because if f6, and again it's white's move, but if white makes any move like say a3, which could make sense to play pawn to b4, then f6 would run into this move, knight takes d5, and the queen's not going to be able to take on d5 because of the move bishop c4, which would pin the queen to the now open king on g8 because we moved that f-pawn for black. So at the moment, f6 is not a threat. So still, I'm not inclined to see a positional, a tactical breakthrough here. So I'm looking for some means of increasing the positional plus that I have in this position. I'd kind of like to put something on e5 if I could. It's not possible at the moment, but I'd like to play knight to e5. I'm not sure how I would support that. Maybe a move like bishop over to b5 here, and the capture on c6 could allow me to put something on e5. That seems sort of appealing. Another idea that I'm seeing positionally here is the idea of pawn to a3, because I can't play pawn to b4 at the moment, although as I'm saying that, I'm questioning that assertion. I'd like to play pawn to b4 and then pawn from b4 to b5. And initially, it doesn't look possible, but there's this very classic idea that if the knight takes this loose pawn on b4, I'll have at least this move rook to b1. And if the knight moves, I capture on b7, and I think that this would have to be considered strides for white, that white is making progress in this position. I'm noticing a little bit of a concern that if I play b4 and the knight captures on b4, I play rook to b1, and black plays pawn to a5 to support the knight, it would seem natural to play pawn to a3 to kick the knight back. But maybe in such a position it's possible to move this knight on g6, which uncovers the bishop to attack that rook down there. The thing is that then I'm going to capture on b4, and after the bishop captures I'll recapture. I'm getting two good pieces for a rook, and I would have to consider that a success. So to my mind, it looks like b4 is a very, very natural move. White's just trying to play pawn to b5, which will push this knight to a square that's not very appealing, maybe a5, maybe b8, and as soon as the knight gets pushed back, then we're also looking at, say, this knight coming into e5. There's no pressure on d4, even though black's a long way from achieving something like that anyway. And in general, I think that this is just building on white's strong space advantage. I don't see what black can do in the meantime. He can try something like rook to e8. He might try pawn to a6, after which you just play pawn to a4 and continue to push through b5. But all of these moves seem to me to allow white to expand his advantage by pushing that knight off of c6. So at this point, I think in a game that I'd very likely just play pawn to b4. I want to take another second and think about if I'm missing any other tactical ideas here. None are occurring to me, and I don't see other positional ideas that are as good as pawn to b4 and pawn to b5. I mean, one can think about trying to slide a rook to the e-file and reconfigure these bishops so that we could work with the open e-file. White would like to make use of this open e-file, but it just takes more time. It's not a priority. The pawn thrust b4, b5 seems very natural and effective to me in this position. Well, this is a clear miss, and it's not one that I'm thrilled about because I think that I should have seen this idea, and I just got wrapped up in this idea of pawn to b4. And the better move here, although pawn to b4 may have value, is simply king g2. And so after king g2 in this position, white simply intends to play his rook over to h1, and from h1 we have threats like rook take h7. We can double the rooks, and honestly, after you double the rooks here, it's almost over because that bishop on h7 is so bad. So this is clearly the best move, and after this, the engine says that the advantage is almost winning, and it makes perfect sense. This idea is not an untypical one. It's been played in some beautiful games by Karpov and other great players, and it's one that I should have seen. So after king g2, simply rook h1, trying to double the rooks is just devastating for black. Perhaps the best move is queen d7, which was played in the game, and the queen can come to g4 check, but the rook gets to the h1, king g2, queen d7, rook to h1, queen g4 check, and then king f1. And the rook's already on the h-file, and the queen is exposed to moves like knight e5, for attacking with the bishop on e2, and there's just nothing really that black can do in the position. He's in such a bind, and this makes perfect use of the rooks, which in my consideration I was thinking about where the rook should go, and I didn't give it enough thought, and I said they'd like to be on the e-file. And it's clear that the h-file is much better in this position when you see it, and in addition to being just better, it's a lot easier to get the rooks onto the h-file and have that impact. So this is a nice idea. It's an instructive idea, but it's still one that I've seen before, and I'm frustrated that I didn't see in this particular position.